Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Terry Manning, and I work with the special education department at the school district. And Anna Zerfas is the parent navigator.
Yes, I am the regional parent navigator for Stone Soup Group here in Fairbanks, and I cover the interior and the northern parts of Alaska.
So today we're talking about understanding de-escalation and proactive and reactive strategies. We will have a video and some talking points, but we're also going to be asking you to give some of your input on what you do and what's been effective with your child. So today we're going to be talking about behavior. We're also going to be looking at proactive and reactive strategies, the principles of de-escalation, and other reasons why children may have issues and what they're trying to get out of it. And then some trauma-informed tips. So behavior. We know that behavior is communication. It may not be communication that we like, but our children are communicating with us by how they are showing up. So why does it happen? It could be because they're looking at controlling the environment. They're trying to express a need. They're trying to gain attention or gain or get away from something. They're also, another way to look at it is saying what are the functions of the behavior? So looking at what is it escape? You know, are they trying to get away again? Are they trying to gain attention, whether it's from you or from somebody else? You know, do they want something tangible? Is there something they're trying to get? And then looking at sensory, they're going internal. They're, you know, they might be rubbing their arms, trying to, so that they don't have to engage in other behaviors. So I love the pink little thing there. It says, it's all fun and games until someone figures out the function of your behavior. So true, whether it's kiddos or whether it's adults. You know, once somebody has figured it out, then everything's, it's game off. And on the other one, it keeps getting worse. And so you say his behavior keeps getting worse, then why do you continue to provide the same consequence? The whole Dr. Phil thing, the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping that you'll get a different result. So if you could put in the chat box, what are some behaviors that you are dealing with your children that are challenging for you?
Interrupting.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to bring up as well is a lot of times when a child shuts down, the absence of behavior is also communication.
Absolutely.
So reminding my daughter to do her homework constantly. I think every parent in the room has that problem. School refusal, yes, especially right now.
So looking at some of these behaviors, what do you think the function is? So is it escape, attention? Is it they're looking for something tangible, or is it a sensory issue? Oh, yes. Every time you say it's time to do schoolwork, she says she's hungry. So I would think that would be definitely escape. Right. Yep. Then the constant request to buy things. What do you think the function of that behavior is? So when we're looking at the buying things, I would say that it could be two things. It could be attention, and it could be something tangible. So we have to realize too, there could be more than one function of a behavior for a child. So in a school setting, when we're looking at functional behavioral assessments, that's what we're trying to figure out. What is the function of the behavior? And if there's more than one, you know, do we need to address both functions, or is there one that's a primary function? So being able to look at that, and that will help us determine what we need to do to support the student. So there was another one, staying on task, sadness, or bored, being homebound during pandemic. There is no doubt this is a really tough time right now for all kids, and especially our students with special needs. Some handle it better than others. And so, hopefully we'll be able to talk about some things that can be done to support the child, but also to support the parents. This is a community issue, and with your children being at home, what are things that you can do to help some of these behaviors?
Okay, so answer this question for yourself before we watch the video. Do you see yourself as a proactive or a reactive parent?
Far better than others. Proactive means controlling a situation by making things happen or by preparing for possible future problems. Proactive people are the natural teachers, the natural parents, the natural-born leaders. They know how to get organized, and they get organized well in advance. On the other hand, reactive means done in response to a problem or situation, reacting to problems when they occur instead of doing something to prevent them. Reactive people either don't know how to organize an activity or are too lazy to go to the trouble. Consequently, they must react to the disaster that has been created by a lack of structure. One of the most illustrative examples of the difference between proactive and reactive parenting is the use of the phrase, "be careful." Parents both good and bad use this phrase. The difference is in what comes next. Proactive parents use the phrase, "be careful," in conjunction with instruction. They're going to tell their kids what to do in order to be careful. For reactive parents, "be careful" is the instruction. When I was first taking my son out for a walk in which we would need to cross a street, I simply grabbed his hand harder and told him, "stay," when we got to a crosswalk. And if he tried to run out into the street, I would yank his arm back and tell him, "don't do that. You gotta be careful. This is a dangerous area." I was reacting to his natural inclinations, as opposed to planning out what I was going to say far in advance. Reactive parenting like that is lose-lose. Not only does it upset the child, but you miss out on a valuable teaching moment. In addition, the parent also feels like crap. No one wants to go through a situation where you're yelling and losing control of your emotions. I knew this situation was unsustainable and that I could do better. So before our next walk, I sat down and thought, what could I do to make the situation better? How could I use this as a teaching moment and a bonding moment for my son? And what I do is simple. As we start to approach a crosswalk, I have my son identify what color the light is. And then he narrates what we should do in conjunction with that color. In using this proactive procedure, I'm able to transform the crosswalk into a classroom. I can teach my son about rules of the road and traffic safety, how to cross the road by himself. But I'm also able to get down to his level, to look him in the eyes, and have a warm and friendly conversation instead of barking orders. As you can see, this type of proactive parenting is much better for both the child and the parent. It's a win-win. We're not only learning traffic safety, but we're also bonding. Here's another situation that every parent will eventually find him or herself in. Let's imagine that you have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and you're planning to visit grandmother next week. She lives 3 hours away. What will you do to get ready for this trip? Every parent knows what the trip to grandmother's would be like without some type of organization. Proactive parents are in charge, and they're actively planning and organizing the trip to grandmother's well in advance. Reactive parents, not so much. Proactive parents see the problems that might arise in this situation far in advance, and they have an entire routine built around the smooth operation of the car and the people in it. Proactive parents set their kids up for success in events like these. They might prepare snacks and drinks, have some coloring books and new crayons. They'll definitely make sure to fully charge the battery of everyone's electronics. They're not thinking one step in advance, they're thinking 10. Reactive parents don't think this way. They just put the kids in the back seat and take off down the road. You can only imagine what happens next. Before they've gone a half mile, the big kid takes something from the little kid lets out a shriek and grabs it back. The big kid shoves the little kid hits the big kid, which is always a bad idea, and the big kid whacks the little kid, who starts crying. And of course, one of the parents turns around and snaps. I want you to stop this fighting right now. You sit on your side, and you sit on your side. And I want both of you to keep your hands to yourselves. I don't want to listen to this fussing all the way to your grandmother's. The parent might not want to listen to that fussing, but they will. Having no plan to prevent it, they must now live with it. There is a pattern of speech to reactive parenting. We all know it. That pattern of speech is nag, and then nag, and finally nag some more. For example, I am sick and tired of coming into your room and seeing your clothes all over the floor. Let me tell you something. I was not put on this earth to spend my entire life picking up after you. Have you ever heard this kind of speech? I know I sure have. Now, what has this parent failed to do? They failed to train the child to perform. They've given a reprimand instead of an order. They yelled at the kid instead of instructed them. How about saying something like, pick up after yourself? It either goes in the closet or in the hamper. Which one do you think will get a better reaction from the child? Don't lose sight of the fact that you're not begging or pleading or even asking the kid. You're just giving a clear, concise, and easy to follow direction that the kid can follow to great success. What sets proactive parents apart is not their goals and objectives, but rather their procedures. Proactive parents know how to organize an activity in order to get things done. In order to get things done right the first time, every time.
My reaction to this, there's one word in here that I have a hard time with. And when he talks about the lazy parent, I have that same reaction when we talk about lazy kids. And I don't believe that typically somebody's lazy. It may be a skill deficit. They may not know what to do or how to do it, but it can come across as being lazy to some people. So I'd like to, that's my reaction to this. I think that there are some great strategies in here, but I'd be interested in hearing from a couple of people as to their reaction to the video.
I think I have a feeling that it seems very idealistic and there's and very black and white. Like I know that you can be very proactive and still run into major difficulties, say on a road trip. It's not unlike you flip the switch to proactive and solve your problems. But I mean, I get where they're coming from in the video.
That there's a bit of reality, real life in that when you've set your procedures up, but life happens and then you have to go with other strategies. Is that what you're saying?
Or that, like, I don't know, in our case, like the planning the road trip thing is a perfect example. We not only charge all the devices and create like tons of activities and healthy snacks and like all kinds of, I mean, a long, very, very long list in preparation for road trips, and still end up with lots and lots of whining and
He's touching
not necessarily
me.
fighting, but lots of stress.
Yeah, I think I would say our strategy is lined up with the proactive parent, but the outcome in this video is not the outcome we get at all. We don't get this in any way. That's what I would say.
It's more like, he's touching me. Make him stop looking at me.
Yeah, we don't get too much between the siblings. It's more like things that are beyond our control.
Right. And there's always going to be that, isn't there? Something beyond your control. And I think what he was saying is to part of it was to have your procedures in place as much as possible. And I see this in the chat box that in reality, parents are both. There are some who are more than lean more one way than the other. And it's important to recognize the situations when you're prone to be reactive, to identify your triggers. Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk more about reactive and proactive, is because, sometimes you do have to confront things that are out of your control, and all you can do is react to them. So if you have to react to them, what is a better strategy than a not better strategy?
Right. If there's a safety issue, you're definitely going to be in reactive mode. You're not going to sit down and say, okay, what should I do? What procedure should I put into place so they don't get hit by the car? There are some things that you are going to definitely be more reactive in the situation. And that's what was being said in the chat. So good.
So when we respond reactively, we tend to be responsive or react to something outside ourselves. So when we are responding reactively, simply, it's an immediate response we have that is intended to change the current behavior that's taking place. And like Terry was saying, a lot of times the reactive strategies come into effect when it is usually like a safety issue or an uncontrolled or uncontrollable situation that comes out of the blue, that we, don't have procedures and we haven't had a plan or talked about in advance. Some examples of reactive strategies are praise, giving a high five after putting toys away, saying great job after completing a spelling activity. And I would go one step further and make that specific. So give specific praise. So great job on that spelling activity, or great job on that spelling test. So you're giving them targeted praise. Rewarding a desired behavior. Sometimes bribes work. That's, everybody knows it. Every parent has had to bribe a kid once in their life at least. So providing that assistance, or, giving, if, star charts, penny boards, if a child raises his hand, instead of calling out, giving a sticker for behavior. Then we have planned ignoring, and I don't know how many other parents have done this, but this was something that I did. Not responding to a child until the behavior that you are asking for happens. So especially like with the interrupting. Me and my son had that issue when he was small, and especially when I was on the phone. And I couldn't multitask. I couldn't pay attention to him and pay attention to the phone. So it became where I would tell him, okay, I'm not going to listen to you while I'm on the phone. And if you need to interrupt me, this is how you interrupt me. You say, Mom, can I talk to you for a moment? Or Mom, excuse me. And it took time, but after a while, with the planned ignoring and him knowing that that's what I was doing, he came to understand that the way he could get my attention was with these trigger phrases. And then there's, of course, redirection, which a lot of us do as parents every single day to get our kids out the door, to get them to do schoolwork, to get them to do, anything. So when your child throws this block, say it's not okay to throw blocks, but you can go outside and throw the ball. So giving them a safe alternative to the behavior that has the same tangible feel, but is not unsafe.
So we have in the chat, it's difficult to be proactive when you're in survival mode, which is absolutely true.
And everybody's in survival mode right now.
And giving yourself grace to say,
Yes.
I'm in survival mode, and then finding support. And if there is a time period where you can have some downtime to plan something, the area that is the most difficult, to plan procedures for that, giving yourself the permission to say, I'm not going to be able to do it all. So what's the most important thing that I want to look at? And in this situation, just in normal times, it's challenging enough, but in our COVID situation, it's even more important to realize that none of us is going to be perfect, and situations aren't going to be perfect. And we want to make sure that when dealing with challenging things as adults, that we have supports too, because if we're having a challenging time, it's going to be really hard to support our children. So definitely great comment, because a lot of people are in survival mode right now. So looking at the proactive, being able to respond proactively. We're looking at creating or controlling a situation by causing something to happen rather than waiting to respond to it after it has happened. So those time periods that there's a challenge. So I think it was math or spelling, that your child is going to be hungry when it's time to do math. So what are you going to do before you start that math situation? Do you do a snack beforehand, or do you talk about what's going on? What is it about the math that's a challenge? Is it that the child isn't understanding, and you might not be understanding how much they don't understand? You might not realize that. So I love this quote in here. Either we spend time meeting children's emotional needs by filling their cup with love, or we spend time dealing with the behaviors caused from their unmet needs. Either way, we spend the time.
Well, especially when they're seeking attention, they're going to get the negative attention or the positive attention. It's all the same. It's attention.
And correct. And it's our reaction a lot of times to them when they're trying to get the attention. So we'll talk some more about that too. And we are not saying that any of these things are as easy as reading it, talking about it, and it's going to be cured. I mean, this is part of just an ongoing process of working with our children to figure out how to help best support them, knowing that we sometimes have to work on ourselves too. Oh, and I see that the constant process of trying and occasionally just hitting a limit. Absolutely. And what do you do when you hit the limit? Is that when should you engage with your child when you're at your limit, at your wit's end? I mean, I was working with a school team, and they were talking about, they were setting up their procedures for the kiddos they work with, for when it's time, when somebody's hit their limit, and how they tag out. And somebody else tags in. You don't always have somebody else to tag in, but how are you going to remove yourself from the situation so it doesn't get worse? Pushing a child into a corner isn't going to help the teaching of them, and it isn't going to make you feel any better either. So yes, being able to look at each situation. We have something else we agreed, makes you want to think about how you want to give your energy. Absolutely. Then I'm teleworking and have lots of meetings and limited time to do schoolwork with the kids during daytime before they're too tired. And it's, yeah, and it eats while, excuse me. So I'm not saying while you do the schoolwork in my house. So yeah, I can imagine that it's so chaotic that when you're trying, and what's kid nature? When you as a parent have something you have to do, don't they want your attention? Like Anna was talking about on the phone. She gets on the phone and her son wants to talk to her. So coming up, it may be teaching some skills to the kiddo, talking with them when it's not at a heightened situation about what the expectations are for them. Is it going to be 100%? It's a human thing, so no. But that going back to that whole process and trying and trying. And then if you have somebody to tag out with, that's going to be helpful. So when we're looking proactively, we're looking about pre-planning. So as much as things that you can pre-plan for, do. There are going to be things that you can't pre-plan for. That's just also part of being human and being real life. So making sure that those things that you can control, you do. And then also, I would put in here too, the understanding of where your child's functioning. Sometimes we think that they're little adults, but if we look at their executive functioning skills and where their brain development is, they're doing their jobs. It's sometimes really inconvenient that they're doing their jobs, for their age range, or it's really frustrating. And again, it goes back to that being able to see how you react to it. And if you have procedures in place and it doesn't work the first time, then you figure out why, and then see if you can change it up a little bit to make it more positive and productive.
And consistency is key. If you decide on a plan, then stick to that plan. You can't try it once or twice, and if it doesn't work, give it up, because kiddos can take up to 30 times because their executive functioning, like Terry was talking about, is still developing. And so, it can take quite a while for it to stick, but once they've got it, they've got it. And so if you're consistent with it, that can really help them get it eventually.
And it's important to teach the skills that you want them to learn before they ingrain the inappropriate skills or the negative behaviors. You want them to know what it is that you want them to do. So that expectation, a lot of times I hear it regarding husbands and wives, they can't read your mind back and forth. Well, our kiddos can't either, and they don't have the background knowledge to even know what you might be expecting. And that repetition is so important. In reading, it can take up to 200 times for a student to learn a reading skill, depending on where their levels are, and the same for the behavioral skills also. So some strategies, another way that we say this, proactive or preventative strategies. So sometimes you're going to put all the preventative strategies in place and they still may not work, but being able to be reflective about what worked and what didn't work will hopefully help make it successful for the next time. So looking at, if you're looking at your schooling that you're doing at home, using that high interest materials during the non-preferred tasks and activities, so that looking at practicing math problems on an iPad. A lot of kids love iPads. If your child doesn't love iPads, that's not going to be reinforcing. So that's not something you're going to use. You're going to want to make sure that it's something reinforcing for your child. We can give you many, many different reinforcers, but you'll have to know from your individual child's interest area of what kinds of reinforcers that you're going to use. It could be reinforcing to you, but not to your child. And I think sometimes that's the hardest part, is you think, well, I think it's great, so you should think it's great too. And it just does not work that way. Do any of you have examples of reinforcers that have worked for your children or your child? Okay, making it into a pretend play scenario, nice. Play is a great way to teach skills. Okay. So another strategy is to modify the task. It could be that the number of chores that you have the student doing, or the number of activities that you have the student doing, are too much. So you need to break it down so that they're only doing a certain amount at a time. In reading, making the passage in a shorter chunk. A lot of students, when they see a whole reading passage, they just wig out. They are so overwhelmed with the words on the page. So it's easy. Just take a piece of paper and cover those words. Do a quarter of it, and as they're learning to, or they're continuing to read, go down. So modifying is okay. We're looking at another strategy, reading a book about a concept. And so some kids love that, being able to, that's reinforcing to them to be able to read about it. Building in the breaks, huge. A lot of times we want to say, you're going to get everything done before we move on. And so you need to schedule exercise breaks or a sensory activity, something to do that's not either sitting in front of a computer or sitting at the table working. Because when you're in school, you get up and you're moving around. As adults, a lot of the webinars we're doing now and trainings, it's 90 minutes of work, 30 minutes of break, and then 90 minutes of work. And that's for adults. So it's going to be shorter time periods for kiddos. So being able to give work time, first work, and then have like a 2-minute break or a 15-minute break. You determine that as the teacher at home. And the question is reward after good schoolwork reactive?
I think that depends, because, if the kid knows they're going to get a reward, then it's a bribe. If the kid doesn't know it's a reward, that they're getting one, then it's reinforcing.
Right. And sometimes they'll know it's, if they know that first they do this work, then they're going to get this reward. So that first, then it's a good reinforcer. And that's why it's important to know what the reinforcers are. Other proactive strategies using visual cues. A lot of in classrooms, and so would work at home too, I believe, would be providing that picture schedule so that they know what the routine is. Don't assume that your child is going to remember what the routine is at home. Things are just changing up so often. So if you have that picture schedule for them, that's really very helpful. And then using cue cards and social stories, whatever visual cue your child responds to. We also, in the school district, our ABLE program, they have lots of strategies that with using visual cues and strategies for working with kiddos that are proactive and reactive, because we know you have to have a balance. So also looking at the environmental modifications. So where do you have your child seated? In front of the TV while they're doing their schoolwork probably isn't effective. For some kids, being in front of the window isn't, because of being able to zone out into the snow right now. So looking to see where they're going to be most successful is important. And I wish we could say, here are strategies that are going to work for everybody. They just don't work for everybody. Just like we are not reinforced the same way as adults, each individual child is reinforced individually. So, and then dimming the lights might be helpful also. Okay.
And one thing that kind of was my pet peeve as a as a teenager especially, is I am very music oriented. And so I could listen to music and do a really good job on my homework. In fact, if I was not listening to music, I did worse on my homework because I was very scattered. And my father used to have so many issues with this because he didn't understand. He's not a music person, and he didn't understand how I could get homework done if it wasn't silent. So being open to what your child, how your child works best, because some kids can listen to music and do great work. Some kids can't. Some
Right.
kids need it to be silent, or they need to have white noise or background noise or of some sort. It just depends on your kid, and being open-minded enough to find the right strategy for your kid.
And it's all individualized, and that's the challenge too, is we all have,
Especially when there's multiple children in the house.
yes, if you, I'm guessing that some of you have more than one child that are sitting at home and who are doing schooling. So it's kind of like directing the circus. How is you going to meet this student's need and for each of your children? And so absolutely not an easy task at all.
Headphones have come in really handy. My best friend has 5 kiddos from the ages of 13 down to 4. And she says headphones have actually saved her life because every kid gets a pair of headphones in the morning, and they put them on before they take out their iPads for school, and they can each pick what works for them. Whether it's, I have the 13-year-old loves listening to rain for some reason, and that seems to help her. Whereas the little boy, who's 9, is all about listening to what is that game called? With the blocks, Minecraft. He loves listening to Minecraft tips while he works. So it just kind of depends, and headphones can be great savers.
So now we're going to go on to some strategies for at home. When we're working with teachers, new teachers especially, when they're going through, setting up the scenario to make it a positive situation with kids. Like at school, it's greeting students at the door. So at home, these are challenging times. Won't even pretend to know how things are going in each one of your houses. But if it's stressful, you have to remember that you still need to greet your child positively. And it can be challenging if it's been a rough day. So finding those times that you can do that, especially in the morning and just different times throughout the day, and establish and maintain a good relationship. And sometimes letting go of schoolwork to develop the relationship is going to be really important. And I say that coming from this perspective of a teacher. It's okay sometimes to say we're going to do that schoolwork later. We are going to develop the rapport, and because all day is not school. You still have to have a relationship with your child when school time is done. And then use reminders and cues. This could be really challenging because you think, I've told you 15 times already. You should remember this. And I see some of you giggling, and it's, for some kids, it just isn't. If they have issues with memory, they're probably not going to remember every time. And you think they should. How could they not after they've done it every day? If you have a kiddo with a learning disability, not just a learning disability, any of the disabilities, and there's working memory issues in there going on, they need those reminders, those cues. And it's not because they're being defiant. Sometimes it can look that way. If you can look past the behavior to see if it's more about defiance, and yet sometimes it could be, or is it the fact that they really can't remember and it's a skill that needs to be developed? And then optimizing the learning environment. Having the TV on could be a challenge for some kids. Some kids can't block out extra stimuli. And then also, are there a lot of different Zoom meetings going on at the same time, and that's interfering with what's going on? So look at your setup. Is the environment a good learning environment in the home? Understanding that it's not always going to be easy. I feel like a broken record, and I hope you're hearing this. We understand that it's not going to necessarily be easy. So, but it's going to be helpful if you can take one issue at a time and see if you can address it. Give behavior specific praise. So, oh, that's great. It's so wonderful to see you sitting at the table and staying on your Zoom meeting and engaging in your class with your class. Whatever it is that you want them to be doing, definitely praise it up. You can't give too much praise at this point, but making sure it's specific is important. This is another challenging one, especially when you're tired. You've been cooped up together all the time, for days on end. Being consistent in how you apply the rules. Because I don't know about you, but I know many kids who are master manipulators, and they will try their darndest to keep at you, to say, so that you'll give in to something that they want to do when you've already said as a rule that's not happening. So if they're good at it, you know what, you have to acknowledge that they're good at what they're doing, but then it's about how are you going to keep yourself engaged so that they don't wear you down. And then if they do, give yourself grace, forgiveness, and try it again the next time. Actively supervise. Kids during the school day are supervised quite a bit, so you may have to look at whether or not they're being given enough supervision at home. And then a very important one is setting clear expectations. We can't assume that kids understand what we want. We have to teach it. We have to tell them. We have to teach it. We might need a visual of it, and we have to practice it. Again, you're going to feel like it's a broken record for you.
And Terry, if you don't mind, I would like to say something about the expectations. One thing that me and Terry have learned through teaching these classes and watching videos and trying to find information for our presentations is a lot of times adults talk to each other in a language that kiddos don't understand because they don't have the history or the historical knowledge to understand those idioms or that slang or that level of talking. And so, what might be really clear expectations for us is not a clear expectation for them. And so being when you say, this is what I need from you, be very clear at their level what you're expecting from them.
And kiddos with language disabilities are even more susceptible to not understanding what you want. But it's not just if they've got a language disability. I mean, all kids, as Anna was saying, if they don't have the background knowledge, that prior knowledge, they won't understand. And it doesn't matter if you tell them 10 times, if they don't understand it, they don't understand it. Okay, thanks, Anna.
So now we'll just give you some principles of de-escalation that are really, really important. Everybody likes to have their personal space. Some individuals and kiddos have no concept of personal space. And so that's something to remember. Sometimes personal space bubbles can depend on mood. So try to be cognizant of that. When you're all in the same room together, all in the same four walls together for weeks on end, as we have all learned now, it's really hard sometimes not to respond in anger or frustration, and instead to be logical and measured. But kiddos respond better to logical and measured and I think everybody does, than anger and frustration. Establish verbal contact calmly with your kiddos, and be concise and speak in short, easy to understand sentences or phrases, and repeat yourself, repeat yourself over and over again. That's how kids learn, is repetition. Listen closely what the kiddo is saying. So what are they actually saying, and not just what's coming out of their mouth? What is the meaning behind what they're saying? Identify their wants and feelings and try to accommodate the reasonable requests so the kiddo doesn't feel like you're saying no all the time. Agree or agree to disagree with the kiddo's concerns while avoiding negative statements. Set clear limits with expected outcomes. So, this is what you need to do, and this is what will happen if you do this. Offer choices. So, when my child was little and I was a single mom trying to get him ready and out the door, and he wanted to dress himself, and it was taking an hour for him to pick, it came to the point where I was like, okay, you know what? You can pick the blue shirt, the red shirt, or the green shirt. Which one would you like? So I'm giving him choices, limited choices. So it takes him a shorter amount of time to pick, but and we get out the door, but it still gives him those choices and feeling like he accomplished something. And always review the event and look for areas of improvement. Sometimes you can totally pat yourself on the back and be like, score for the parent team. We just totally mastered that, and sometimes you're like, okay, we got to start that one again. And do it over again. Remember that as parents, we make mistakes, and that we also have the opportunity to learn from our mistakes and do it differently the next time, do it better the next time, so that we can be that example for our kiddos.
So looking at, in our school district, we use crisis prevention intervention. And the whole goal is to keep kids from escalating to where it becomes aggressive behavior. So here are some 10 other de-escalation tips. And it's really a lot about the verbal de-escalation and the space. So looking at being empathetic and non-judgmental. Again, same thing that Anna's list, making sure that you're looking at it through that person's eyes. So the kiddos, for the kiddo, it's the most important thing going on for them right now. To us as adults, we may be like, oh my gosh, that is just a silly thing. But we have to put ourselves back in their shoes, and how and think. Sometimes it helps to think back to, how was it for you when you were a teenager? Did things seem very personal and highly emotional? Probably. A lot of us go through that. So knowing that is helpful. Respecting that personal space, because if you do get into a child's space, it may be confusing to them. If they're in the middle of a meltdown, you don't want to agitate them more. So being very clear as to where their personal space is. So using non-threatening nonverbals. So making sure that you keep your tone and your body language neutral. We all know that when we get escalated, we can easily escalate other people. Have you ever been in an office situation where somebody comes in and it's like the sky is falling and all these different things are happening and it's really bad, and then you can get sucked into that? So I'll just say I have, and not the best shining moments at times, but we want to make sure that we stay neutral so that we don't cause somebody else, our children, to escalate. We want to be able to diffuse the situation. So avoid overreacting. So your positive self-talk is important. I can handle this. I know what to do. Or I need to just walk away from the situation for a minute. But being able to calm yourself first before you start dealing with the situation. Again, that knowing that if you're in a situation of safety for your child, you're not going to stop and do all of your self-talk and then say, okay, now I'm going to deal with it. You're going to deal with the safety issue first. Focus on the feelings. Try to figure out what's really going on with the child. They're saying one thing, but they may not be able to express themselves so that they can tell you exactly what's going on. You may have to process with them, and you may have to process at a different time, but keeping in mind that you're trying to find out what's really the issue. So then ignore challenging questions. Don't ignore the kiddo. There's planned ignoring, but when you're trying to de-escalate something, you don't want to completely ignore your child. So you want to focus on how you can be problem solvers together. And then setting limits. You have to be able to be clear and speak simply, because they may not be able to focus on what really needs to be said or on what you're saying to them. So if you're clear and concise and you can offer positive choices, that may help de-escalate the situation. We all like choices. None of us likes to be backed into a wall and told we have to do something. Our words can very much increase or decrease behavior issues. And then choose wisely on what you insist upon. What's your battle? You'll hear that, choose your battle. If you can offer flexibility, if it doesn't really matter, and you can give choices to your child, that either choice is a positive one. So, but they still feel like they get to choose.
My sister has 3 daughters, and one of them is a teenager. And my sister, when it comes to choosing her battles, this is kind of how it goes in her house, and is a really good example of choosing her battles. My sister's oldest wanted to dye her hair, and her mom's like, that's fine. You can dye your hair whatever color you want, but you are not getting a tattoo until you're 18. So, looking at the, transient versus the permanent. Does it really matter if they color their hair, bright pink or fluorescent orange, at this moment in time? What matters more, getting a permanent, something affixed to their body, or letting them do something crazy with their hair? So choosing that battle, from, toddlerhood all the way up to, mid-adulthood. I have a 21-year-old son, and I still have to choose my battles with him. So understanding that this is a process throughout their lifetime.
So allowing for the silence for reflection. Sometimes we want that response right now. It's like, look at me and tell me right now. And sometimes you have to allow some time for processing, and then allow time for decisions. We know that not all of our kiddos are able to make quick decisions, and the processing time is slower. So making sure that they get that time to process through what you're talking about is really important. So common parenting traps, the ineffective directives. So not giving clear directives so that the child knows what they're supposed to be doing. And when you are giving the directive, especially if your child has ADHD, they may not have heard what you said to them. They may, a strategy is to use their name first and then give the directive, so that they know that you're talking to them. They're not going to pick up those cues otherwise. And if you put a string of commands together, the memory issue is real for a lot of kids. And so if you want them to unload the dishwasher, take the trash out, clean their room, and clean the bathroom, you're going to have to break it down. And you may have to write it down or have pictures. So and also the repeated frustrations. And we've talked about this, the saying things over and over and over again. So as a parent, it's hard to deal with that. And that's repeating is one of the highest areas of frustration. Using interrupted commands. If you get interrupted and when you're giving directions, the child may not be able to follow along. Not giving clear and concise directives. So being very specific and understanding the age level and the ability level of your child is going to be important. So if you've given a directive and they're not following it, is it behavioral or is it a skill issue? Do they not know what to do, so they don't do it? I've had students in the past where I am sure that they've known how to do something, and then I find out they really didn't know how to do it. I hadn't broken it down enough for them to be able to get started. So I don't know about any of you, but there are times if I'm not sure what to do, that can sometimes paralyze me. And it looks like procrastination, but it could be in some cases that I'm not sure what to do, so I just don't do it. If there is something that you want your child to do, don't ask them to do it. Because if you give that, put it in the form of a question where they can say no, and it's something you really want them, expect them to do, do you want to do this? Well, or, yes, the whole, do you want to do this? They're going to say no. They don't want to clean their room. So you may say, how about you put your backpack together tonight instead of tomorrow? That's open for interpretation about, do you really want them to do it? And they could say, well, how about I don't? And be okay. They're okay with that. You're not okay with that. And then, let's clean your room. Let's do this. Let's do that. So instead of saying let's, say you need to clean your room. So it's clear, concise, and they know what's expected of them.
Circle of security is a concept that I actually ran into when I was pregnant with my son. And it's funny because it really hit me, and I was like, okay, if it was kind of like, I'll be the maypole, I will stand in the middle and I will let my son circle around me, doing what he needs to do and then coming back to me as a touchstone. And that worked out as our circle of security, so that if he needed me, I was right there, and he decided, how far away from me he was going to get. And as he got older, I referred to this as submarine parenting. Everybody's heard of helicopter parenting. Mine was submarine parenting. A perfect example, I don't know why I remember this, is he was like 14 something and he wanted to go to the movies with his friends. But of course, overprotective mom of the one child was like, okay, we can do this. So I let him go to the movies. But of course, I'm in the movie theater, across the lobby, just there. I'm not particularly watching. He just knows that I'm there if he needs me, and I went to a different movie and he knew where I was just in case he needed something. And then, as he got older and got a cell phone, that widened his circle of security a little bit more, where he knew he could call me if he needed something. So, children start out with a very, very small circle of security when they're young. And then as they get older and they feel more secure in both us and themselves, their circle of security gets wider and wider with us as their touchstone. So some things that we just wanted to call attention to, because we have a lot of trauma right now. Some kiddos already had trauma, some kiddos are experiencing trauma right now. And I think all of us are going through kind of a global trauma. And so some things that we, especially right now, can remind ourselves of before responding to a child who is acting out or escalating is that we need to take deep breaths to calm and center ourselves. We're the adults. We are the captains of the ship and we set the examples. My student for right now is doing the best that they can given the skills and the resources they have in this moment. And it kind of depends on their executive functioning. You know, we could have a 13-year-old kiddo and physically they're 13, but they may have a special need that makes their executive functioning level, 4 years old. So we have to remember to look past the body into the mind when we look at that moment. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet, and it won't be until they're in their mid-20s. So remember, what age is their brain at versus what their body may look like? And their protective brain, that primitive, fight or flight reptilian brain, is directing them when they're in that state of escalation. So looking at it from that perspective, how do we help them come out of that state and into a calmer regulation zone? And just choose, every moment of every day how you want to respond. Kindness and compassion, or do you want to react in anger? It's all about setting that example for their executive functioning and their prefrontal cortex.
And also, the kindness and compassion you have for yourself.
Yes.
We're all making it through. And so that is my hope for all parents, all staff, is that we all remember that we are human, and there are going to be days where it's super challenging. And so we want to do the best we can and move forward. Also, looking back at number 4 with all of the executive function skills, if I could have a crusade, it would be about executive function skills, teaching that.
Yes.
Next semester, because I think when we realize that a little bit more and understand where children are in their development and their typically, and then we can look at it like Anna was saying, if they're not typical in some areas, what can we expect them to be able to do? And so be looking for that next semester for more in-depth executive function information.
And something I wanted to add at this point is it's okay to give yourself a time out. And it actually can wake the kid up. They'll be like, Mommy needs a time out. And they're like, what? And so it helps you, if you put yourself in timeout and it gives you that moment of calm before you can, because then you can say to the kiddo, Mommy was getting angry and frustrated, so Mommy needed a timeout so that she wouldn't act badly. And when we say that to our child, it helps them understand that we are just like them and that we have bad times too. And that, by seeing us regulate ourselves by putting ourselves in timeout or taking a break or whatever it may be, then that helps model that behavior for them as well. And it gives us that moment to just take a breath and be like, okay, I can do this and go on with our day.
So, Anna, I would also like to, in addition to thanking everybody for taking time out of your Saturdays to be here, to ask you if you would, in the chat, put your one golden nugget. A lot of this stuff is review. We know this information. Sometimes it's helpful to review it, just like we say for kids, review. But if you wouldn't mind putting in one golden nugget that you got from the time that you spent here today, or if you have, and Anna will be sending out also a survey for the class as a whole, but I'd be interested in your golden nuggets.
And if you have any questions for us, we would be glad to answer those.
And if you don't have a group or a support group, and you're looking for that, Anna through Stone Soup Group, is the resources there are great, being able to do that, because in this time period, if you are in survival mode, you want to be able to reach out to others who are going through the same. And you can, those of you up here can also reach out to me, and I can connect you with others, or to Anna too. But this is like, sometimes we have to de-escalate ourselves before we can help de-escalate our children.
Any questions? And like we said, you know, you can always reach out to us. If you think of anything, if you need anything, I am here in Fairbanks and I cover, you know, all over the place. And then we also have parent navigators who cover the lower half of the state as well. So we can help you with anything. And we do actually have a parent support group once a month. So you can always take a look at our calendar to find that information as well. It's called Building Strong Parents. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the class, and we're so grateful that you came today.
And may you stay warm.
Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Yes, please stay warm and stay safe. And thank you and take care.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Have a good Saturday.